Hello everyone, we are hanging out on the Star Wars The Old Republic test server, and we're going to be taking a look at the Sith Warrior Marauder, or in this case, just the Marauder, and its three disciplines: Annihilation, Carnage, and Fury. We're taking a look at this not too long before the expansion is slated to come out. It's supposed to come out on February 15th, 2022. The test server is where you can go and test things out before they go live and give feedback. So it's not going to be entirely finished, and we don't know how far off the changes are from what it will show up as in the expansion. Like, we don't know if this is exactly how it will be or if there will be major changes once the expansion actually goes live. I'm going to take some time to go through the three different trees for the Marauder, so Carnage, Fury, and Annihilation, and show off what they look like and do my best to compare to what they look like on live. All three of these disciplines are ones that I just started learning recently, so if you want a really high-level overview, you're going to have to go talk to somebody who's played these for multiple years. I'm just going to tell you what's on the trees. So let's start off with Carnage. So these are what the new character trees look like when it comes to choosing your abilities. If you're familiar with the old utility system, which was what was in the previous system, the previous expansion, some of the utilities have made their way into this tree as part of the choices, but the actual utility system is gone. Now you'll see this tree shows you choices that you can make or abilities that are directly related to your discipline. It's not the only abilities you have. You may notice that you have the old school attacks from the Sith Warrior. They're already baked into your bars. They just don't show up in this tree right here, as this tree is for your discipline specific abilities or choices you make. So at level 1 right away, you'll get your Ataru form, just like before. And at level 23, you'll pick up Berserk. Much like you would on the previous server, it's a buff to your abilities. And you'll pick up Gore as Carnage, which is one of your key special Carnage abilities at level 23. Where it starts getting interesting is at level 27. At level 27, you'll be able to pick between 3 different abilities that are passives. Oh, not just a passive, one that can replace Gore too, that affect the way Gore works. So Gore, by default, is a single target attack. A single target attack that kind of pins down the enemy for 1.5 seconds, and it also reduces the armor rating by 20% for 45 seconds. Now, here's what the options are for you being able to change it. If you decide to replace Gore, you can change it up with Driving Gore, which says swiftly moves towards the target, impaling them with both lightsabers. So the big difference is that you'll get to use it as a short leap. And the Marauder already has one leap. It's called Force Charge. But by default, Carnage Marauder only has one, if I'm remembering right. Yes. And you can add a second leap by changing Gore into Driving Gore. And it also boosts your movement for 10 seconds. So if you really want a lot of movement, you can change Gore and the way it works. However, there are 2 other options which just change the way your normal Gore works. The first one is Berserk Gore. Gore's critical hit chance is increased by 10% while Berserk is active, and whenever Gore consumes a charge of Berserk, its cooldown is reset. So you'll be able to use Gore more often and possibly hit harder with your critical hit chance. The third option is Piercing Gore. Gore deals additional damage to up to 8 enemies in a cone behind the primary target. So you'll pick a target and then everything behind it also gets hit. So very interesting, changing Gore up from a single target attack to a multi-target attack. It's an option between that multi-target attack, changing Gore into a 10-meter range jump or leap to the target, as well as just, doing more damage. That could potentially change the way your rotation works as well, because Berserk will get reset more often. So at level 35, you'll also get another choice between 2 passive abilities and 1 instant ability. So if you're already familiar with playing a Marauder, you may know the ability Predation, which is your operation buff or your raid buff. It increases the movement speed for all of your group members, your operation group, by 10%, and also increases your defense and purges movement impairing effects. So if you want predation, predation was something you kind of had before, and you had to build up your, I can't even remember what it's called, build up your fury, and then use predation. And now it's part of the tree. If you want it, you have to actively choose it. The second two options are overwhelming slashes and snaring slash. So overwhelming slashes says Ravage immobilizes the target for 3 seconds and generates 1 rage. So Ravage becomes a stun. And snaring slash, vicious slash, massacre, and ravage slow targets. They hit by 50% for 10 seconds. So adding a slow to a bunch of your abilities. So that's a choice between 3 there. That's going to be an interesting and kind of weird one to make. At level 39, you'll pick up Massacre, which is a big part of the Carnage abilities rotation. But what's interesting is at level 43, you'll get to pick between 3 passives that affect the way Massacre works. So the first one is called Defensive Stance. Each time you deal damage with Massacre, your damage reduction increases by 2%, stacks up to 3 times, and lasts for 6 seconds, so it becomes a defensive ability. Rush Down. Massacre deals 10% additional damage per movement enhancing effect active on you. That's interesting. You're going to have to do some math, or someone's going to have to do some math and figure out how much damage you could do with that and how much movement abilities you could stack onto yourself, especially with these new options here. And lastly, Frenzied Blade. Massacre's critical chance is increased by 20%. Activating Massacre reduces the cooldown of Frenzy by 2 seconds. So just a kind of critical chance damage boost and reducing the cooldown of Frenzy. So 3 options that affect the way Massacre works. The third choice that you're going to make, I think it's actually your 4th, at level 47 is between 2 passive abilities and 1 instance one. The first is Furious Power. This consumes all ability charges of Furious Power and applies Furious Power stacks to you. Each stack increases your next direct single target melee attack by 25% and is consumed whenever you deal damage with these attacks. Recharges 1 ability charges every 30 seconds. So right now, as far as I can tell, out of all of the classes in the entire game, the Marauder and its buddy on the Republic side, the Sentinel, have the most amount of buffs. So abilities that you just click, they don't do any direct damage, but they buff your other abilities. You got like 1, 2, 3, and then Mr. Red Angry Man, where is he? Number 4. He's on the tree now. So Furious Power. He used to be something that's this ability used to be something that was in your class by default, but it is now a choice at level 47, and it's an active buff that you have to actively click to get the benefit from. So someone's going to have to do the math kind of between these other 3 options and see which one does the most damage over a period of time or instantly. And then not only that, players are going to have to decide if Furious Power is still the winner. Are they the kind of player who's going to actively be able to track Furious Power and its stacks and its best use? Because these other 2 just kind of happen whether you click this button or not. So if you're a very casual player and you struggle to play, this option might be easy. Just don't pick the one you have to click. It's kind of like clicky relics versus non-clicky relics. So the other 2 options are Swiftness. Critically hitting increases your movement speed by 5% and your crit chance by 5%. Lasts for 6 seconds and stacks up to 5 times. And lastly, Quickness. Critically hitting with force-based energy attacks reduces the cooldown of rage spending offensive abilities by 1 second. This effect can only occur once every second. So these are not necessarily like a direct extra boost of damage, but one increases your crit while making you faster, like physically while running around. And the second reduces the cooldown of rage spending offensive abilities. So that may mean you could do more abilities during a shorter period of time and do more damage over a shorter period of time. Once again, we will send hearts and kisses to our theory crafters who figure this stuff out for us and tell us which we should pick. At level 51, you'll pick up Ferocity, once again a major part of being a Carnage Marauder. And at level 60, you'll have a choice to make. And this choice pretty much stays the same. across all 3 disciplines at level 60 and beyond. So I'll go over them on Carnage Marauder first. So at level 60 on all Marauder disciplines, you'll pick between 3 passive options. The first one is Inexorable. You generate 4 rage when stunned, immobilized, put to sleep, or knocked around. Additionally, the cooldown of Unleash is reduced by 30 seconds. So if you're already familiar with the utilities, you may notice that some of the utilities have directly made their way into this tree, and you just have to choose them if you want them. So your second option is Interloper. Force Charge gets an additional charge and builds 2 Fury when activating, so some extra jumping around and leaping. And lastly, Defensive Roll. Reduces damage taken from area effects by 30% and increases internal and elemental damage reduction by 3%. At level 64, you'll pick up your last Carnage ability, which will be Devastating Blast. And at level 68, you'll have a choice to make, much like all Marauders between all 3 disciplines. At level 68, your first option is Cloak of Annihilation. Each use of Assault, Battering Assault, and Crippling Slash reduces the active cooldown of Cloak of Pain by 3 seconds. The second option is Path Carver. Sweeping Slash deals 15% more damage, so if you're attacking a lot of enemies, might be useful. And lastly, Blood Ward. Activating Saber Ward grants immunity to stun, sleep, lift, and incapacitating effects for 6 seconds, and getting attacked while Saber Ward is active heals you for 3% of your maximum health. This healing effect cannot occur more than once every second. At level 73 is the very, very difficult choice to make. So all classes, all disciplines, all combat styles, whatever you want to call it, have a difficult choice to make at level 73. For new players, this is going to be a very exciting choice where you get to choose between 3 powerful or interesting abilities. For existing players or returning players, it's a very disappointing choice as you usually had all 3 of these beforehand, and now you have to pick between one of the 3 once the expansion hits. So for the Marauder, I think the Marauder has one of the really harder ones to choose between. So the 3 options you have are Force Choke, which is a 4-second stun. The second option is Mad Dash, which is lets you leap forward with a lot of movement and gives you a 100% defensive chance while you're moving, a very fun ability. And lastly, Undying Rage, which is your 99% shield, your super shield. And I think all of these are very iconic abilities for the Marauder. So I think it's one of the saddest choices that returning and existing players are going to have to make. But let's go over them so you can kind of decide when they might be best for you and when you can best take advantage of them. So first off, Force Choke. Chokes the target, stunning it for 4 seconds and generating moderate threat. Deals kinetic damage and builds 3 rage over the duration. This ability can be channeled while moving. The second option is Mad Dash. Madly dash forward 20 meters, dealing weapon damage to enemies in your path and increasing your defense chance by 100% while dashing. Can be used while immobilized and purges movement impairing effects when activated. The final option is Undying Rage. It reduces the damage you take by 99% for 6 seconds. So super rough. Super rough choice to make. And that's actually going to be for Annihilation has to make that choice, and Fury has to make that choice as well. So you're not alone, Carnage Marauders. So let's take a look at that final choice at level 78. So at level 78, you have 3 passive abilities to choose from. The first is called Thirst for Rage. Bloodthirst generates 12 rage when activated, and you heal for 1% of your maximum health whenever you activate an ability that consumes rage. Interceptor is the second option. Force Charge, Force Rend, Devastating Blast, and Obliterate snare the target, reducing its movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. And lastly, Brazen increases your damage reduction by 2%, and you build 2 Fury when attacked. This Fury building effect cannot occur more than once every 1.5 seconds. And once again, that last choice there is for Annie, Carnage, and Fury. Let's take a quick peek at these abilities on the side. I don't really understand exactly like why they're grouped off on the side here, but they're basically, I think, passives that happen specifically for your discipline. So in this case, Carnage. I'm going to let you guys just read them on the screen, and you can compare them to what you had previously if you're interested in the passives. And some of them have been renamed and kind of merged together, so some of them may look slightly different than they did before. So we've got Ataru form at level 1, Ataru Savvy at level 23, Ataru Mastery at level 35, Execute at level 43, Blood Frenzy at level 51, Towering Rage at level 60, Efficient Strikes at level 68, Slaughter at level 73, and Frenzied Sabers at level 78. So now we're going to hop over and we're going to go take a look at Fury. So Fury is one I kind of learned recently. It was a bit harder to learn than Carnage, I think, but it was fun and really, really solid rotation once you get it rolling. A lot of memorization of a lot of abilities, but it works really well once you get there. So let's take a look at their tree and their unique Fury abilities in the expansion. So first off, at level 1, you'll pick up Shicho Mastery, much like you did before. And you'll pick up Berserk at level 23. And that converts your 30 stacks of Fury to go Berserk, generating Rage and 8 additional Rage over time. So that's still there. And at level 23, you'll also pick up your Raging Burst, a single target attack. Where it gets interesting is at level 27, you'll be able to pick one passive that somehow affects the way your Raging Burst attack works. So the first option is Subjugate. Raging Burst unleashes a burst of energy around the primary target, dealing kinetic damage to nearby enemies. The second option is Dark Synergy. Dealing damage with Raging Burst or Smash increases your critical hit chance and critical hit damage by 20% for 6 seconds. This effect cannot occur more than once every 8 seconds. And lastly, Unrelenting Rage. Raging Burst deals 15% more damage and applies trauma to targets. Trauma reduces the healing received by 20% for 10 seconds. So kind of interesting. So the first option turns Raging Burst into a multi-target attack, so it kind of hits everything around it. The second option increases your crit chance, so just, you know, do more damage. Oh yeah. And the third option is kind of weird and interesting, and it's going to be very, very situational. So Raging Burst deals more damage, but it also reduces the healing of the target. So especially if you're playing in PvP where there's a healer on the other team, this might be super cool to use. If you are playing, I don't know, there's a couple flashpoints or operations where there's healers on the trash and stuff like that. I don't know if that might be interesting as well. So it's gonna be cool to hear people who know more about this talk about this option right here, I think. So the next choice that you get to make for a Fury Marauder is at level 35. The first one is Snaring Slash, and it goes Vicious Slash, Massacre, and Ravage. Slow targets to hit by 50% for 10 seconds. So kind of like a Carnage had the ability to add a slow to your abilities. Second option is Overwhelming Slashes. Ravage immobilizes the target for 3 seconds and generates 1 rage. This is the same as Carnage as well. Make Ravage a stun. And lastly, here is your Predation again. You had your Predation before the expansion, now it is part of the tree at level 35 as an option. So at level 39, you'll pick up Obliterate. And it's kind of interesting. We saw in the Carnage tree, you would get the option to give yourself a short range leap by adding it to your gore. On Fury, part of the Fury tree is that you automatically get a short range leap called Obliterate. Use it as part of your rotation. So I don't necessarily know if you're using it to get around a bunch, but it's built into the class. But at level 43, because you already have it built in, you get to make a choice about how it will change. So at level 43, you have 3 passive options for Obliterate. The first one is Seething Defense. Activating Obliterate puts a mini ward on yourself, which absorbs 220 damage. Oh, absorbs damage. lasts up to 10 seconds. We're hanging out on Korban, so these a lot of these numbers are not very reflective of what the damage would actually be. So Obliterate actually becomes a defensive ability if you choose this one. The second is activating Obliterate immediately builds up 10 Fury. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so Furious Discovery is that middle one, building up, working towards your 30 stacks of Fury. And lastly, Obliteration. Killing an enemy within 3 seconds of dealing damage with Obliterate resets the cooldown of Obliterate, Smash, and Raging Burst and increases their damage by 25% for 6. 6 what? We don't know, but I think we're going to guess 6 seconds. Perks of being on the test server, not everything's proofread yet. This effect can only occur once every 6 seconds. So that's going to be a very interesting one. So first one's a defensive. Second one is building up extra Fury, which you can use towards Berserk, I think, or maybe something else. I'm not sure. Maybe Predation? I don't know. Whatever. And Obliteration does a lot of stuff. So it resets Obliterate, Smash, and Raging Burst. And Raging Burst is one of your key abilities. 6 minutes, apparently. And it also just does extra damage with those abilities afterwards. So this could be a real heavy hitter. Someone's going to have to do the math on that one between what you can do with your extra stacks of Fury there. All right, and at level 47, you have 3 options. 2 are passives, and the third is your Furious Power, which we kind of talked about earlier. It was ability you had before, and it basically makes you do extra damage, but you have to actively click it. So the first one is Furious Power. The second one is Criticality. Your critical hit chance is increased by 25% during Berserk. And lastly, Furious Rumination. Each time you deal damage with a force-based kinetic or energy attack, you generate 1 rage. So if you're a very casual player and you are struggling with the rotation for Fury, I know this is something that was quite hard for me to learn. I felt like I was constantly out of energy, and I feel like the smallest mishap made me go right off course. This could be great with you. You just generate your energy, your rage, like from doing anything. You want to go hit things with a lightsaber? This is going to be your go-to, right? So at level 51, you're going to pick up Force Crush, an important part of being a Fury Marauder. And at level 60, you'll start making the same decisions just like you did in Carnage that we talked about earlier. At level 64, however, you will pick up your Furious Strike. And at level 73, you'll have to make that same really hard decision between Force Choke, Mad Dash, and Undying Rage, your defensive ability that we talked about earlier. Everyone has to make that choice. It's very sad. But in return, you get some very interesting choices up here to change the way how your Raging Burst and how your Obliterate works. And there's this really interesting choice at level 47 too. I'm curious to see what people like about this one here, with that ability to just generate Rage or use Furious Power, which is clickable, or just get a free critical hit chance during Berserk. So I'll show you these passive abilities for Fury real fast if you want to read them yourself. You get Shi-Cho Mastery at level 1. Battle Cry at level 23. Route, I think, at level 35. Cascading Domination at level 43. Destruction at level 51. Gravity Vortex at level 60. Force Flagellation at 68. My goodness. Furious Rage at 73. And Bloody Slashes at level 78. So now we're going to go take a look at the final trait, Annihilation. This is the one that I know the least about, and I'm just starting to learn. And as far as I can tell, it has one of the most difficult rotations in the game for a newer player to learn. So I'm very curious about what type of tree options there are, because we did see in the previous tree there are some options that are not necessarily stronger, but may make the class easier to play for a casual player. So I'm curious if there's more in here for Annie. So you'll get Berserk, much like you did before. Requires and converts 30 stacks of Fury to go Berserk, increasing the crit chance of your bleed attacks by 100% and causing the bleed damage you deal to heal your group for 1% of max health. Lasts for 6 charges, and that's at 23. Very similar to what you had before as an Annie Marauder. And Force Rend. you'll pick up at 23, which is one of your key Annihilation abilities. But at level 27, so Force Rend is a single target damage over time. So it makes your enemy bleed and take damage over time. And it also gives you free energy, so rage. Here's how you can change it with your 3 options at level 27 in the expansion. So the first option is Juyo Rend. Force Rend immediately maxes out your Juyo stacks and deals 3% more damage for each stack that you have. So, boom, extra damage. Second, Draining Center. Activating Force Rend immediately builds 10 Fury. So your stacks of Fury that you're trying to get up to 30. And Forced Rend deals 4 times its damage whenever it consumes a stack of Berserk. Whew! Let's see. I wonder where this fits into things for theory crafting. Critical bleeds. While Force Rend is on the target, the critical chance of all your bleed attacks on that target is increased by 10%. So that's super interesting. So these 2 options here, you'll kind of do extra damage the whole time you're playing with your damage over time attacks, versus this one you can do 4 times the damage while you're using a Berserk stack. And this one I didn't even know what to do with this one. Once again, I'm very interested in finding out where players who are smarter than me, better at doing the math, and that act of figuring out what might be better is called theory crafting. So we're going to watch what other players have to say about these options here. So at level 35, you have 3 options. The third one is Predation, that instant ability that you had before, and you'll have to actively choose at level 35 if you want to keep it. But the other options are Snaring Slash, which causes Vicious Slash, Massacre, and Ravage to slow targets. So this is actually a choice that it seems all 3 trees get to make. So adding a slow to your abilities, turning your Ravage into a stun, or getting Predation, which makes your whole group move faster. So at level 39, you'll pick up Rupture, an important part of being Annihilation Marauder. But at level 43, you'll be able to choose between 3 different ways to change Rupture. And this one's very cool because 1 is a replacement and 2 are changes, like passive abilities. So if you choose to replace Rupture, which is a single target attack that also does damage over time, you can change it with Force Fracture. Lashes out at a target with the power of the Force, dealing energy damage and an additional internal damage for each of your periodic bleed effects on the target. Oh, that's interesting. So that would definitely, if you chose to take that, once again, we'll see if the math works out, but it would definitely change the way you'd want to use this in your rotation, because you'd want to have a bunch of bleeds on the target before you rupture it. And then the other 2 options are Blood Wave. Dealing damage with Rupture sends a wave out from your primary target, causing your bleeds to deal damage on nearby targets. That's pretty cool. I have no idea if the animations for these are finished on the test server or not. I'm sorry. Rupturing Rage. Rupture applies trauma and refunds its rage when used while Berserk is active. Trauma reduces the healing received by 20% for 10 seconds. So very interesting. It refunds its rage if you use it while Berserk, so you use less rage. Reduce the healing of your enemy, kind of like we talked about on a different spec earlier. And this one over here makes it an AoE attack. Or you do this, turn it into something that does extra damage if you have bleeds on the target already. Very interesting. This got some cool choices in here. I'm very curious to see what players feel about these changes, or these options rather, because a lot of them are just additional. So at level 47, you'll have your option between 3 things, one of them being your Furious Power buff. You had this one before. It's now part of the tree at level 47, and you have to actively click it to give yourself a buff. But the other 2 are passives. So the first one is Bleeding Center. Critically hitting with periodic bleed damage builds 2 Fury, even during Berserk. This effect cannot occur more than once every 2 seconds. So ideally, you can use Bleeding Center, I think, to build up Fury a lot faster than you could before, versus Furious Power is a direct buff to your melee attacks. And then Blood Fury. I like this icon. I don't think I've seen it before. I like this guy. All melee damage attacks deal additional bleed damage while Berserk is active. This effect can occur more than once per second. So just bonus bleed damage while Berserk is going. So once again, this is one of those things that we'll have to wait till other players kind of do some math and kind of figure out how might this be most effectively used. At level 51, you'll pick up Annihilate, which is one of your super key abilities as, shockingly, an Annihilation Marauder. And at level 60, you'll make that same choice. Same choices as the other classes here. And you'll pick up your Deadly Saber, your final Annihilation ability, at level 64. And just like the other classes, the other combat styles, rather, the other disciplines, dang, too many words, you'll have to choose between Force Choke, Mad Dash, and Undying Rage, which, once again, is a sad but important choice to go make. I hope you'd like taking a look at Carnage, Fury, and Annihilation. Before we go, I'll show you the Annihilation passives on the right here. We've got Juyo Form at level 1, Hemorrhaging Smash at level 23, Hemorrhage at level 35, Juyo Mastery at level 43, Bloodlust at level 51, Pulverize at level 60, Blood Guard at level 68, Swift Demise at level 73, and Devious Wounds at level 78. So that's what the Marauder and its counterpart mirror, the Sentinel, is looking like on the test server not too far off from the expansion 7.0 Legacy of the Sith coming out on February 15th, 2022. If you enjoyed this video and really want to support this project of in-depth news and guides about Star Wars: The Old Republic, visit Swtorista.com/support. And if you want similar Star Wars: The Old Republic videos to show up on your YouTube homepage, especially as we're moving into the expansion, subscribe to this channel. See you guys later, and goodbye.